Hello, BillWhittle.com members and non-members alike. This is a special right angle lightning round brought to you by the members of BillWhittle.com. I'm Steve Green, your host today, along, of course, with Bill Whittle and Scott Ott. If you're new to this used to be a members-only show where we rotate, and that's my third week. I always do a lightning round, and instead of going deep into one topic, I pull headlines, smaller stories out of the news, don't tell Bill or Scott what they're going to be, and then I ask them about them, mostly out of sadism. But also for your entertainment, because I suppose you've got a little sadist in you, too. We can hope. Anyway, Bill, let's start with you this week. Oh, I love this story. I love it when the doomsayers are proven wrong. Internet traffic is way up, and the internet seems fine. Did we maybe spend too much time ferociously debating net neutrality?
I guess my first answer is debating what? You know, I mean,
yeah, that was tearing really, America apart.
Yeah, and the you know, the transgendered bathrooms. I seem to remember something about that, and you know,
urinal neutrality.
I will say that you could almost when the long history is written, you could almost make the case that the entire Cold War and the 25,000 thermonuclear warheads that were facing us for 30 years of that ended up doing more good than anything in the history of the world, only because it created the internet, and the internet by design was specifically created in order to send information through multiple packets of the same information through a number of different channels so that it would survive full-scale nuclear war, and there'd be a chance to still be able to keep communications intact. That fundamental design of an information net rather than an information line is the most important thing. Well, it's not just the most important thing that's happened in my life. It's the most important thing that's happened since the steam engine. And so I am pleased, not terribly surprised, that the internet has more robustness to it than we even thought in the beginning. And what most people don't realize is that I forget what the actual percentage of the World Wide Web is, Scott or Steve, but the dark web and the foundational elements of the internet that most people don't even know exist. I mean, it's really like dark matter. It's like there's more of the stuff that nobody sees out there built into the internet than the stuff that's visible. So I just can't imagine what this pandemic would have been like without the internet. Not only because of all of the entertainment options that it provides us, which again has kept us from just going
right.
Completely bonkers, but also because I just cannot imagine how different things would be if the only information that we got was the information that came to us through official channels as reported on the mainstream media, you know? I mean, when I think about the perspective, the intellectual perspective that the internet has provided, it's astonishing. And along with that freedom and that broadness of opinions, you get lunatic fringe ideas on both sides, but that's kind of the fun too, I guess. And it teaches us, I think just the fact that we have access to so much information teaches some of us anyway how to figure out what really is real and what isn't. And we're finding, as we get through this, that the sources that we're hearing on the internet, the small sources, seem to be a lot more in touch with what's actually happening than the official sources. And thank God for that as well.
Yeah, don't color me very surprised on that last item. All right, Scott, next headline for you. Bryan Adams. Do you remember him from the 80s? His first album just blew up the charts in 1984. In fact, I'd forgotten about...
Was he Cuts Like a Knife guy? Is that him?
Yes.
Okay.
I'd forgotten about all but maybe one or two songs off that album. I just bought a new copy of it a few weeks ago, and I'm listening to this thing, and it's like, oh my God, I remember that song. I remember that song.
He's got a 3-pack-a-day voice, if ever there was one.
Oh yeah, this thing was huge. Anyway, this guy is still touring, still recording. Well, he was still touring, as you'll find out from this tweet. Bryan Adams faces backlash after blaming his canceled shows on people who eat bats. Here is the exact quote. Tonight was supposed
now
to be.
Now be careful with this exact quote, brother.
This is an exact quote, although I'm going to clean up one particular word.
Thank you.
And by the way, when we talk about this Wuhan virus, this Wuhan flu, the coronavirus, whatever you want to call it, we're talking about something that came out of the Communist People's Republic of China on the mainland. We're not talking about the finely run Republic of China, which is based on Taiwan. And great things come out of the Republic of Taiwan because those Chinese are not ruled by communist thugs and are perfectly awesome. Anyway, here we go. Scott Adams says, tonight was supposed to be the beginning of a tenancy of gigs at the Royal Albert Hall, but thanks to some bat-eating, wet market, animal-selling, virus-making, greedy bastards, the whole world is now on hold, not to mention the thousands that have suffered or died from this virus. There's a firestorm. Do you think he did it on purpose, or is he really trying to make a point by expressing some genuine frustration, or is it all the above?
Well, I don't know enough about Bryan Adams to know whether he's the kind of guy who takes shots like this on Twitter or wants to express himself politically. I do, think as a former musician, by the way, which very few people know about and very few people should, but as a former rock and roll band lead singer, the idea that you had a gig at the Royal Albert Hall that you can't do because, in part at least, of some people who lied for a long time about something, I can see being upset about that. I mean, that's a pretty awesome opportunity to play at a historic venue that now gets cut off, and just the general frustration of, rockers were meant to rock, and they were meant to do that in front of an audience. And the fact that you cannot now get a live audience anywhere is incredibly frustrating. If it tweaked some noses and drew some blood, so much the better. But I don't think he was completely out of line with that, although, it wasn't a scientific statement that he was making there, not vetted by Dr. Fauci or Dr. Birx.
It's accurate, though.
The only two authorities we have on Earth. But the frustration, I think, probably resonated. If that's a tweet, I wouldn't be surprised if it got retweeted a lot. And I don't think that he lost a single fan as a result of it. And my guess is the first gigs that he is able to play afterward will represent a revival of his career.
But didn't he get a lot of blowback, Steve?
He did. Bill, he got accused of all sorts of horrible things, racism being the most common one on Twitter and Instagram, which is where he put up this thing. But I got to tell you, Bill, you just reminded me of the best response I saw to this thing. I think it was on Facebook. Somebody said about all these charges of racism and whatnot, now we know how many trolls it takes to fill the Albert Hall. Isn't that great? That's a Beatles reference for our younger viewers. All right, Bill, back to you. Oh, geez, this one is just so predictable it makes me sad. A supporter of the Muslim Brotherhood, that's a terrorist group in Egypt, was named to the Facebook Content Oversight Board, which decides whether or not shows like this can be shown on Facebook.
Howdy, boys.
Bismillah. I was asked once at a speaking event whether I thought that that progressivism or Islamism, jihadism, was a bigger threat to America, and I said, "There's no question about this whatsoever. It's progressivism, it's leftism. Yeah. If you get rid of the control of the information and people get actual information, then they can make decisions like adults, which the left believes that regular citizens are not capable of. The left believes that regular citizens are not capable of any rational decisions, so they'll filter the information so we do the right thing." The amount of certainly I'm not surprised, but the amount of let's just say pro-jihadi censorship is a drop in the bucket compared to the amount of pro-progressive censorship. They're so far out of scale that to me it's virtually a trivial problem. At least it is today, anyway. Now, a lot of that reason that it's so trivial is because we have a president who on day 2 decided to use the most powerful non-nuclear weapon in the inventory to make it clear to ISIS that the days of getting 45 minutes advance notice of an airstrike coming in were over. What I'm basically trying to say is that the ability to censor anti-Islamic content is significantly less impactful today because there's just not so many jihadis as there used to be. But the anti-conservative bias, the left-wing bias, is really, really very powerful and very dangerous. And I think I think, frankly, I really do think that it should be that the people who make these decisions, these censorship decisions, was this guy a member of a board or whatever? He was a content censor anyway. I think we ought to know who all of them are. I want to know who every single one of them is, and I want to know what their backgrounds are, and I want to know as much about them as they know about me. If you're going to be the person who says, no, you can't say that, or that gets you a strike against your channel, or no, you can't make any money off of this because I personally didn't like it, I want to know who that is. And what it really does, Steve, the whole point of this, the main point is to reiterate once again what a catastrophic mistake we made going to a private host of videos that was ideologically opposed to everything that we say and was willing to censor people for it. I think there's a lawsuit against YouTube. If they admit that they have a censor, then that means they're not a carrier. That means they are a content provider, and their carrier protection, which comes down to, hey, we're just YouTube. We just carry the message. We didn't create it. We're not responsible for this guy saying, this or that. We just air his videos. Well, if they have a censor, that means they're editorializing. That means they're controlling the content. That means they're not a carrier. And I think they should be sued. I think they should be sued out of existence for this. They can't have it both ways, although they're certainly trying.
Well, we've let them have it both ways and for entirely too long. Scott, final headline for you. Oh, I like this one. Apple considering massive shift of iPhone production from China to India. It's not coming back here. We got the EPA telling us we can't build many things here, but you think this is a good move? You think it'll actually happen, I guess?
I think that the form of government in India is more favorable to freedom than the form of government in China, obviously. And so, it's probably a wise decision. And it's a darn shame, too, because it's been American manufacturing facilities that have lifted people out of the mire of the rice paddies in China that despite the malign intent of their communist overlords, they have been able to lift their standard of living over the last several decades. And so, for all the bad things we say about the government, the Chinese Communist government, we mean no ill will toward the Chinese people. And in fact, I look upon them as prisoners. And so some of the prisoners have gotten better treatment in recent decades, largely because the Chinese Communist government have made this a strategic decision to be able to have one foot in capitalism and the rest in totalitarianism, and have managed to use capitalist societies as the funding engine for a failed totalitarian state. That said, I'm glad to see the good people of India benefiting in any way they can. I mean, people from India are rushing to this area where I live. A large percentage of our customers, it seems a disproportionate percentage, are coming from that area of the world because they are very astute in the technology and engineering and mathematics and computer kinds of activities. And so, Apple would be wise to set up operations in India, and everything is going to go great there unless the whole thing with Pakistan really gets out of hand and nukes start flying. But don't worry about that.
Yeah, I try not to think about that one too much. It's gotten hot a couple of times, and I don't want to go there. I had a headline for myself I was going to finish with, but Bill made me have a thought, and that happens so infrequently. Yeah, that I have a thought that I thought I'll share it with you. It's not really a thought; it's more of an instinct at this point. if you ever wonder why our government is so completely dysfunctional, I'm talking about our federal government based in Washington, D.C. here, and there's no denying, I don't care where you are on the political spectrum, everybody agrees that Washington is just dysfunctional as all hell, can't get anything done barely, and is always too expensive and too slow and all the rest. And I can tell you why in one word it's gotten this way. Progressives. There you go. But let me explain that very, very briefly. Starting about 110, 115 years ago, when progressivism became the big thing in this country, they decided to make Washington do a whole lot of things that it just wasn't geared for. Imagine you took a modest family sedan, right? Like a Ford Fusion or a Toyota Camry, just, 4-passenger family transportation. It doesn't go particularly fast or carve the turns like a roadster or anything like that, but it will get you in some comfort safely from point A to point B. And that's our federal government as described by the Constitution. It's supposed to be very modest. It's not supposed to do very much, but what it does do, it's supposed to do pretty efficiently and safely and without a whole lot of fuss. Well, the progressives decided to turn this family sedan into a self-driving car. Only it's not just a self-driving car. It's also a Formula One racer, submarine, monster truck, rocket ship. And you just can't do all that with a 4-passenger family sedan. You can't do that with anything. It's a Frankenstein monster. It's a huge beast. Of course it's dysfunctional. It was designed to do a couple of things well, and that's it. And if we could just get back to those 2 or 3 things, you'd be amazed at how much more functional Washington became. It's worth a shot anyway, isn't it? And that is your lightning round for this week, brought to you by the members of BillWhittle.com. We thank them for their patronage, and we'd love to have you as one of them too. So click on over to BillWhittle.com, become a member. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.